Imagine that you are in the midst of the civil rights era. New leaders have sprung up over the past decade, ushering in a time of change and hope. But imagine that it's April 4th, 1968, and you just found out that one of the most prominent civil rights activists, Martin Luther King Jr., has been assassinated. According to History.com, FBI investigators found a bundle of items across the street from where King was shot. In this bundle, there were 3 items: a pair of binoculars, a newspaper detailing where MLK would be staying, and a gun that had fired 1 round. On all 3 of these items, James Earl Ray's fingerprints were found, and within the year, he pled guilty. However, he soon went back on this confession and pleaded that he was innocent, and he maintained this stance for the next 28 years until he died in prison. And oddly enough, King's family believes that he was innocent. Hi, my name is Paris Seymour, and I'm going to be talking about how James Earl Ray didn't act alone in the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. One of the biggest theories surrounding MLK's assassination is that the FBI was somehow involved. And this very well could be the case. At the time of the Civil Rights Movement, the FBI was increasingly suspicious of civil rights leaders and activists, and the FBI used the threat of communism as their means behind investigating such leaders, such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And these leaders just saw the FBI for what it was, a racist institution. The FBI leader at the time, J. Edgar Hoover, was notoriously a racist, and the one leader he hated more than anyone else, Martin Luther King Jr. According to the New York Times, MLK had rightfully accused Hoover of failing to enforce civil rights laws and indulging the racist practices of Southern policemen. This angered Hoover, and he called MLK the most notorious liar in the country. They continuously clashed like this, and in 1963, Hoover got his approval to wiretap MLK, once again under the guise of protecting the nation against communism. The FBI often wiretapped and spied on civil rights leaders and activist groups for no reason other than fearing those who sought to end the systemic and social injustice in America. These wiretappings weren't for the good of the country like they claimed. They were used for blackmail. In 1964, a letter and package was anonymously sent to the home of the Kings. And in this package contained tapes of King in intimate settings. And the last line of the letter sent with this package is perhaps the most daunting thing. It says, "There is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is." Years after King's death, an activist group broke into their local FBI office and discovered documents about COINTELPRO, which ended up being a series of legal projects carried out by the FBI investigating civil rights activists and groups. With these files came proof of what was already suspected, that the FBI was the one who sent this letter and this package to the King's home, the very one that many interpreted as urging King to kill himself. And King himself believed that this is what the letter was asking him to do. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations said that if the FBI was involved in King's murder, there would be no evidence at this point, and that it would have all been destroyed. However, the committee found that they could not agree that James Earl Ray was the lone assassin in this case. Chief Counsel Blakely suggested that, if not on behalf of the FBI, then Ray could have killed MLK Jr. for a different group. And this is what Blakely believed. He believed that Ray was urged to kill MLK by supporters of then presidential candidate George Wallace, who had gone head-to-head with MLK in Birmingham, according to Time magazine. And George Wallace was a former segregationist, and this fit perfectly with James Earl Ray's own personal beliefs, as he was a white nationalist, and he had actually worked for George Wallace's campaign the very year that MLK was killed. And Ray's movements leading up to the assassination are very sketchy. So there was a mysterious trip to New Orleans a month before the killing, and he suddenly moved to Atlanta. Hampton Sides, who wrote a book about the assassination of MLK and is an expert on the subject, believes that Ray's source of funding for these trips and these meetings and this move to Atlanta are perhaps the most questionable thing in all of this, as there was no way he could have gotten this money without it being from a higher up organization. So he presumes that it was either from the FBI, George Wallace's supporters, or a different organization. So here's one thing that we know for sure. MLK was murdered, and James Earl Ray pulled the trigger. However, what I hope that I've been able to convince you on today was that James Earl Ray did not act alone, and that whether it was the FBI or a group of then presidential candidate George Wallace's supporters, he was urged or paid to do so by a group higher up.